Considering the rate of change right now, the technological change, the feeling that the consumers are controlling, do you think this kind of change is imminent? Do you see any positive outcome of all of this change?
I've thought the change was imminent for about 25 years, so I'm just starting to become a little bit cynical. That tends to happen with the years. There were changes that I expected in the early 80s when I was at General Foods that we're still waiting for. Things like the ability to target directly to individual households and so forth. It's close, it's coming, but it's been coming for about those many years. I can remember, in fact, when I was at Y&R, one of the futurist gurus was a fellow named Bill Donnelly, who I think Bill's now teaching somewhere in Pennsylvania. I haven't spoken with him in decades, but he wrote a book called The Confetti Generation, all about how we're going to be targeting people like individual little bits of confetti, different colors, different shapes, different wrinkles, and so forth, and we're still waiting for that to happen. So, change has been very, very slow. What's been interesting is consumers have been changing at a pretty rapid rate. Technology's been changing, although I think truly consumers lead, and when we see consumers not taking up new technologies and taking up other new technologies, that's proof to me that consumers are leading, although technology is a real facilitator, and what's not following is our business. The fact that, for example, media are siloed, measured separately, planned separately, managed separately, deployed separately for advertising purposes is just the greatest example of how we're not following what consumers do. Consumers aren't siloed, we are. We're starting to see some hope, some examples of that changing. I think, for example, ESPN's a great example of a cross-platform media company that really works hard to integrate. I think what NBC did with the Olympics, that was last year, right? Was a very interesting example as well. And I know there's a lot of thinking about it, and I'd like to see a little more do.
In order for change to take place, the way media is purchased and measured, where do you think that change has to begin? Does it have to be with the perspective of the agencies? Is there an organization that can do it? What are your thoughts?
I think it's either going to happen at the agencies, or there will be some other prospect or process for that to happen. And I think Google sort of looming on the edges of our industry is just kind of the interesting threat that we need. It's almost like, all the countries of the world can't get along until there's the alien invaders from Mars, and then suddenly we all pull together and push them back. So maybe it's not an apt analogy, but Google might be the alien invaders from Mars, although they might be here for our own benefit. I'm not sure. It remains to be seen. The media have to come together at the agencies. One of the most promising developments I think I've seen in recent years has been channel planning, which has been embraced by the agencies. Granted, it had to come, like so many other innovations, from the UK, but I think that's been one of the most interesting innovations because it enables the agencies to look at media on a strategic basis, not just a cost per thousand basis. Cost per thousand reflects a mass communications model where all that matters is how many messages you get out to how many people, how often, how frequently, whereas a strategic view really thinks about how you intervene in a consumer's life and influence them and motivate them. And I think channel planning does, and as it improves, will do even a better job of making that a key way in which media are planned, and that will presumably bring media together in a more integrated fashion. Another aspect of that is the fact, and this goes back, this has been my entire career, is that media and creative are completely separated. Back in the 70s, when I worked at Y&R, you came into the building, 285 Madison, and if you were in media, you went to the left bank of elevators. If you were in creative, you went to the right bank of elevators. In my 9 years there, I met one person in creative, and that's only because we happened to go on a company trip together and kind of met each other and became friendly. The fact that the media are planned separately from the creative that they have to deliver, when their only purpose is to deliver the creative, is just bonkers.
With the silo between creative and media, do you think that's blurring, particularly now with Neurofocus and other brain research companies? Do you think that there will be more of a blending of efforts between these two siloed areas?
I think that's very interesting. I think there's some potential. We've actually done, or had some involvement, maybe I should say, with our friends at Interscope, who are kind of a different take on biometrics, but I think both of those developments are quite interesting. I think the fact that Nielsen made an acquisition in that area is kind of interesting as well, and I'm hoping we can learn something. There's a real fascination, kind of starts with the fMRI work, and it's gone into different forms of biometrics. If we can really understand how advertising influences our thinking, that would be helpful. The issue is, I think it still requires a lot of interpretation. That's why experts like Carl Marcy at Interscope are so vital to this. And I think what's going to be a challenge to these companies is how these techniques can be scaled and become part of our day-to-day process. But the more that we understand how different media deliver messages and which messages are appropriate to which media and so forth, I think we become much smarter, and that comes back to that information leverage versus negotiation leverage issue again. If you knew that a high CPM medium was the best way to deliver a specific message and it was going to result in better outcomes, it's worth the high CPM. So that's got to change, and I think learning about how that works within the psyche can only help. It's a lot for us to take in.
Can you talk a little bit more about channel planning, what it is and how it's done?
Yeah, sure. Channel planning, instead, and it's done a lot of different ways. I'm kind of partial to some of the work Point Logic has done. I think they've done some very, very interesting work. There are other systems out there. Integrations and market contact audit has been adopted by a lot of large companies. Many of the agencies have their own channel planning systems. McCann's Media in Mind might be one of the first. I'm not sure about that, but I know it's one of the first ones I knew of. And they take a look at what the media can accomplish in terms of how they change consumer awareness, how they change consumer attitudes, how they can change consumer behaviors, and that depends a lot upon the nature of the medium, where it intersects with the consumer in their day, in their life, how the consumer uses the media, for what purpose, and so forth. So to cite a simple one, we know television's really good at building awareness quickly, rapid reach with a compelling message, but we also know that in-store media can be very good at activating a purchase. So two completely different media, two completely different uses, and they fit into a plan in a specific way. If in the process of putting that plan together you really think about the consumer's current behavior, how you want to influence their behavior on behalf of the brand, and how the media can play a role in that process.